What an absolute load of rubbish this is. The WBC are at it again, doing whatever they please in the sport of boxing, adding more weight to the argument and the reason that the TKO League has been announced and is coming into boxing. I cannot stand these guys. The We Be Crooks organization. They truly do enforce the rules as and when they please. And again, we've seen another classic example of it here. Guys, stick with me to the end of this video as I try and break down and analyze what is a moving and breaking story. Dmitry Bivol has been stripped. David Benavidez is the new WBC champion. Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. I have a lot of videos to make this week. We've got a lot of stuff going on. I've got to react to Joyce against Hrgovic. I've got to talk about Tim Tszyu. I even want to talk about Wade Concept. I don't know if any of you guys watch his channel, but it's been announced recently that he has now been signed up to the Ring magazine, the Saudi-backed Ring magazine, Saudi-owned Ring magazine. But before I talk about all of those things, and videos will be coming within hours of one another, I think, because there's lots to do and lots to get through, we've got to talk about Dmitry Bivol, the WBC, and David Benavidez. I want to start right here just to set the scene right off the bat. Before I get into this video, I must say, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you're enjoying the content here, if you enjoy what I put out, do like the videos. It really helps. And also, do indeed comment below and let me know what you think about this situation, how the WBC is run, and how you feel about the fact that Benavidez has been made champion in this way. So to begin with, let's have a look at this post from David Benavidez to set the scene. So David Benavidez writes, this was 10 minutes ago, just got the news that Bivol decided to vacate his title instead of fighting me. Now that makes me the WBC world champion at light heavyweight. This is not the ideal way for me to become world champion, but nevertheless, I am now the WBC light heavyweight champion of the world, and I intend on putting the best fights. And dissatisfactory to say the least. You know, if you're a fan of boxing and you want to see the best and most interesting fights being made, this one would have been quite close to the top of your list. Benavidez Bivol was a fight that I was really interested in. There was lots of sparring rumors, and Pete Berg, the movie director, had spoken about how he'd been in a gym once. I think it may have even been his own gym. He'd seen Bivol and Benavidez sparring, and Benavidez had supposedly dropped Bivol with a simple jab, which obviously kind of adds fuel to the fight. To my perception and my reading of the two men, I'd really fancy Bivol for that fight, but at the same time, I think that Benavidez has the right style to cause Bivol problems. It's a very interesting fight to me. And we've seen back-to-back fights now with Beterbiev and Bivol. Absolutely incredible. Clearly the two best light heavyweights in the world. And I do want to see a trilogy, but at the same time, I saw a lot of value in making that Benavidez fight first. It's something that I would have enjoyed seeing. And at the very least, you don't want to see someone become the WBC champion of the world through an email, through being just given the title because they're the next man that was waiting rather than actually in the ring. You want to see those great, exciting and huge fights being made. So the question is, how have we ended up here? What the hell is going on? So let's go to these tweets. So the first tweet we're going to go to here is this one 7 hours ago from Rizzo Suleiman. He says the purse bid for WBC champion Bivol versus WBC interim champion Benavidez is set for tomorrow, April 8th at 10 a.m. Mexico City time. So the purse bid being ordered here has obviously forced the issue. It's time to see if these two are actually going to get in the ring or not. The WBC has ordered that fight, that world title fight. And when you are ordered to fight a mandatory, you have to take it, or indeed you risk losing the belt. Now, why is this interesting? Why is it interesting to me that WBC ordered this fight? Well, to me, to be honest, it's interesting when the WBC orders any fight. Typically what happens with the WBC is they have their favored champions. Look at Canelo, for example, and they very rarely enforce mandatory fights. Indeed, they often sanction fights because the WBC belt will be on the line, but they definitely have their favored fighters, their favorite fighters, the ones that they would prefer to have as champion. And I think what we're seeing here is a very classic example of the WBC sort of making up the rules as they go along. When you go and look at the WBC rulebook, indeed, there are a lot of rules written down, but then there are also stipulations in there that basically override any rule and essentially make it so that they can do whatever the hell they want. Stuff like this is exactly why, as boxing fans, we get tired. It's exactly why the Saudis have been so refreshing, but I think this is a very nuanced and very complicated situation. The WBC don't often order fights. When it comes to the high-profile guys, they often give them time to do as and what they please, what they see fit in their career. So what exactly is going on here? Let's let the rest of this situation unfold. I'll reveal to you a couple more tweets, and then we'll try and analyze why they've actually ordered a fight on this occasion. So around the same time, this was 3 hours ago from me making this video, two tweets came out that sort of contradict each other a little bit. So let's go with the Ring Magazine tweet first. Again, I mentioned the Ring Magazine is owned by the Saudis. I'm not sure how they're running it exactly, but I think we can sort of safely assume that it is going to be a bit of a propaganda machine. How objectively they will report remains to be seen, and it may become less objective as time moves on. But this tweet here says, Dmitry Bivol has informed the WBC he's vacating his light heavyweight title ahead of tomorrow's scheduled purse bid for his ordered fight with David Benavidez. Bivol plans to proceed with an Artur Beterbiev trilogy fight, according to a letter obtained by the Ring. Now, around almost exactly the same time, Maurizio Sulaiman has tweeted this. He says, I have just received a cold and impersonal notification from Dmitry Bivol lawyer Patrick English, with arguments that are so ridiculous that I rather not discussing informing the WBC that Dmitry Bivol has decided to relinquish his WBC light heavyweight championship. We wish Bivol success and hereby confirm Benavidez as WBC world light heavyweight champion. So what is Sulaiman talking about here? I mean, they've both said that he has decided to relinquish the title, but he has sort of inferred and implied that Bivol has tried to worm his way out of fighting his mandatory, that it's not a clean-cut decision. The fact that he's put a lot of emotional and emotive language into this tweet, I've received a cold and impersonal notification. Really interesting me that Sulaiman has decided to, rather than just publish a statement of fact, Bivol has decided to relinquish the title. He's made it emotional, and I find that very, very interesting. This makes me think that he is irritated at the tone of the message from Bivol's lawyer. To suggest that it should be anything other than cold and impersonal is a bit strange. Although, if you know the way historically these boxing governing bodies have run, where it's a lot of who's sucking up to who likes who's doing favors for who, the fact that he might be offended by something cold and impersonal tells you how he might receive something that is warm and friendly. This is a business at the end of the day. The WBC is a business. Boxers themselves are mini businesses. And to be cold and impersonal when delivering a business notification, I think is quite normal and nothing wrong with that at all. For Sulaiman to take objection to that is a bit strange. And then he has cited the arguments that are so ridiculous that I would rather not discuss informing the WBC. I'm trying to just understand what he's articulated here. He's saying that the lawyer has provided ridiculous arguments that he would rather not discuss informing the WBC. So he's saying that he would rather not talk about the conversation that he'd had to inform the WBC that Bivol has decided to relinquish the title. Basically, what he said there was a whole lot of nothing, other than the fact he wanted to just let us all know that there were some ridiculous excuses in there as to why he is not taking the fight. Now, from the outside looking in, there's one very clear reason why he's not taking the fight. And that is because he wants to do the Beterbiev trilogy fight. Understandably so. I think it probably generates more money at this point. Beterbiev's getting older and doesn't have much time left. And I also genuinely believe Bivol to be an honorable guy. I think he wants to do right by that trilogy. I think he feels that he owes Beterbiev, and I really do believe this. I don't think Bivol is just a straight businessman. I think he's a true warrior with a true warrior spirit, with a very good code of ethics. I've heard him talk quite deeply, quite philosophically. And I like the way that Bivol looks at the sport and looks at the game. None of this is against Benavidez, by the way, and I would have probably preferred to see that fight next. But I also appreciate what Bivol's mindset is, which is he's given me the rematch. Now I'm going to give him that third fight, and we're going to settle this once and for all before he gets too old to make it a competitive contest. The older that Beterbiev gets, the less intriguing that fight becomes. So the quicker you do it, the more competitive it will be, to my mind anyway. But there's a whole nother layer here. There's a whole nother layer to this. And it all links back to what I talked about at the beginning of this video. Turki Al Sheikh, the TKO League, and that very aggressive statement they came out with when they first launched. They basically declared war on all the promoters and all the governing bodies and came out and said, look, we're going to do this league and we're going to they essentially said in so many words, we're going to take over boxing and become the prominent promotion. They described it as a league. It is essentially an in-house promotion where they will do all the fights in-house. That's what the UFC is. It's just in boxing, we don't use the league terminology. And to my mind, this is probably the WBC fighting back a little bit. I definitely think there's an element in here of Sulaiman going, no. We're one of the oldest boxing governing bodies in the world. We have so much history tied up in us. You don't tell us what to do. And in fact, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take one of your flag bearers, key ambassadors for Riyadh season, for the fights that you've been having, and we're going to tell him he has to fight David Benavidez. Benavidez, who's not been typically on DAZN fights. I think Benavidez is still with PBC, and he's been fighting on Amazon Prime, so he's not been on DAZN. He may have been at some point, but not recently. That Morel fight, I think, was on Amazon, if I'm correct. So the point is that he's someone who's not aligned particularly with the Saudis yet, and I'm sure the Saudis will want everybody. But I think by enforcing that mandatory, they're basically saying, look, we still have control. We decide who fights for our belt. And at the end of the day, you have made a threat to us. You have made it uncomfortable for us, I suppose. And I do see an element of the WBC pushing back here. I think that is definitely a part of why they've ordered this mandatory. They've not been as patient and flexible as they can be with certain champions. That is to put it very kindly. And, the other side of that is just outright bias and knowing that their business benefits the most from certain guys holding the belt. I think there's also the factor of which fighter has the potential to have the bigger profile. And because of his Mexican-American heritage, I think it's Benavidez by an absolute mile. And, the WBC being a Mexican organization, a Mexican-American organization, I suppose, that kind of fighter from that kind of background is going to suit their heritage very, very nicely. So I think there's favorability towards Benavidez in terms of where he's from, probably the way he fights as well. It's very entertaining. And the fact that he is promotionally aligned in a way that doesn't exactly match up with the Saudis right now. I think there's a bit of a political game going on here. And what this all leads us to is a situation that we all dread in boxing, and the situation that we have all dealt with as fans for years, that we've had to accept for years as fans, which is the best don't fight the best. That there are political divides, that there are things going on behind the scenes that mean we don't see the fights that we want to see. And it's happening again. This is the start of it happening again, in my opinion. I think it's probably going to continue. The Saudis have a lot of money, so hopefully it won't be as bad because they do have the ability to put a lot of fights on. Also, I'm probably being a bit exaggerative because at the same time, more and more promoters are aligned with the Saudis, but there will be certain fighters that are outside of that at the minute, and Benavidez happens to be one of those for now. But the more power they gather, the more chance there is that these fights get made. But right now, you're going to see moments like this where the Saudis are gathering more and more power. Certain people don't like that. Certain people have been upset. The boat's been rocked. And I genuinely believe there is a big element of that in this. The WBC saying, we are still our own organization. We will decide who fights for our belt. Not you in Saudi. It would have been very easy for them to have, kept all the belts for this third fight. But at the end of the day, Bivol has decided to prioritize this third fight. And I think there was a bit of a veiled threat from Turkey towards Bivol as well. And that quote is on screen here from Turkey, from the ring. He says, I am no longer, this was a few weeks back or a month back or so, I don't remember exactly, but he said, I'm no longer interested in Bivol Benavidez and I will not bid on it. I think Bivol knows who has delivered for him and who hasn't. My advice to Bivol, don't be late because every day something changes. And that, I say threat, that essentially reads to me as if you go and fight Benavidez, then you're no longer going to be in favor with me. And at the end of the day, it's true to say the Saudis are the one that have delivered the biggest fights for him so far in his career, his biggest paydays, and have really moved the needle for him in his boxing career. So I can understand Bivol doing what Turkey wants. Would Bivol have preferred to fight Benavidez? Hard to say, but I think that for the reasons I cited earlier, he's more than happy to do the Beterbiev trilogy fight. It's a bigger fight. It is still a bigger fight. But I think that if you can make the right matches for Benavidez in the meantime, you can still have a massive fight with Bivol at the right moment. And I think that will happen. I think it will come. I just think that it's going to be delayed because of the things I've talked about in this video. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you've enjoyed my assessment and my analysis of the current situation. At the end of the day, what this comes down to is this. I am massively disappointed that we won't see Bivol Benavidez for the WBC title and that it has simply been emailed across to Benavidez. You are now the WBC champion. How many fights has he had at light heavyweight? I think 2. That fight against Morel was a good fight and he won it well. And I think Benavidez is good enough to be a champion at light heavyweight, but it's a really difficult one. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, now he's going to have that belt. I wonder if whoever loses that trilogy fight will go and fight him for the WBC title. There's not that many fights at light heavyweight. The depth in the division isn't great in my opinion. And so I think that we need Benavidez and we need Benavidez available. We can't have a standoff. We can't have a war between promotional outfits and belts in this situation. And it maybe alludes and hints to where we're heading if relations aren't smoothed out between the belts, the Saudis, the promoters. I think that there could be problems. Now, look, right now, we're fine. We've had Frank Warren's just signed for DAZN. Him and Eddie Hearn are going to be putting fights on. We've got Golden Boy on there as well. Top Rank, I believe, are working with them too. So a lot of the big promoters are on there. PBC are the one that are going to be problematic. Their whole ethos since their inception has been working in-house, but at some point that might have to change for them. And it remains to be seen which way we're going to go. We are going to see little pushbacks here and there. And that might just be this, it might be a blip, or it might indicate that actually everyone's going to dig their heels in and we're going to get these classic schisms in boxing that have always developed over time. But guys, let me know in the comment section below, do you agree with my analysis of this? How much would you have liked to have seen that Bivol Benavidez match? Because I think it would have been great. You never want to see someone get a belt like that. And that is the most disappointing part of it. But I hope you've enjoyed everything I've said today, guys. And as I always say, on to the next one.